Hello, this is Mr. Kenyanola, and I'm going to help you find X. So, look at this problem. You may be getting overwhelmed by just looking at it. A circle with lines and even more lines and angles and even a square in there. So, I'm going to help you figure out how to not be overwhelmed, not to be underwhelmed, but just whelmed on this problem and to get this problem correct. So if you want to press pause so you can draw this in your notebooks, so you can follow along, or press pause so you could draw this in your notebooks and then try to race and see who get the answer first. Let's go for it. So, and then press play again, see if you got the correct answer. So, I'm going to use a couple of tools. My first tool is, of course, my trusty blue pen, and not one but two highlighters to help me visualize on what things to focus on at certain points as we do this problem. With these circle problems, it's very important to know what to focus on, and so you keep your mind at ease and you can focus and get the correct answer to each step. So let's take this my yellow / greenish neon colored highlighter, and I'm going to highlight this angle right here. Okay, and if you guys remember, two chords or two lines that make an angle that intersect on the circle is called an inscribed angle. So the vertex is on the circle, it's an inscribed angle, and this inscribed angle is eating this arc, or this is the intercepted arc. So if this was a mouth, it's eating that arc right there. That would be the piece of macaroni or whatever that it's eating. And if you guys remember, the arc is twice the measure of its inscribed angle. So let's make this twice as much. So it makes it so we get the measure of its intercepted arc. So to make this twice as much, we just put a 2 and multiply it by that measure, 2 times x squared. Next thing we do is we're going to take our other highlighter and highlight this line right here. And this is a tangent line, and we're going to highlight this secant line right here. So we know this is a tangent because it intersects the circle at one point. Here's the point of tangency. We know this is a secant because it goes through the circle at 2 points. So to help us focus, try to forget or try to ignore this circle right here. Try to ignore this circle and just focus on these two lines. These two lines right here make an X. And so this X gives us or makes some other angles. It makes, so look at this right here. And we have an X, so it makes vertical angles. So this angle right here is vertical to this entire angle right here. And as you guys know, vertical angles are congruent. So if this angle is 236 minus 15x, so that means this angle, this entire angle, is 236 minus 15x. So I'm going to write that, 236 minus 15x. All right, so because they're vertical. Now let's focus back on this arc right here. So let's focus on everything again. So there's that. So we have this 2x squared right here, which is this arc. And as mentioned, we have this tangent and we have this secant right here. And from a previous video, if you guys watched it, or from your geometry teacher or a friend told you, when you have a tangent and a secant that are eating an arc like this or intercepting an arc, that angle that's eating that arc is half the measure of that arc. So again, this angle is half the measure of this arc. So half of 2x squared is just x squared. And so let's focus on this line right here and these two angles right here. Both of these angles sit on this one line. And if you guys remember, a line is 180 degrees. So this angle and this angle have to add up to 180 degrees. These are called supplementary angles, okay, because they supplement each other to make that 180 degrees, or a linear pair. A linear pair means two angles that add up to 180 degrees. So let's zoom out so we have some space on our paper to do some work. So since these two add up to 180 degrees, since they're supplementary, let's write that as an equation. So this angle is x squared plus this angle, which is 236 minus 15x, and they add up to 180. So we're going to write that 180 degrees there. And now you may feel a little anxious because that's a large equation. You haven't seen one of these since last year in Algebra 1. And so we're going to have to channel our inner Algebra 1 or last year's Algebra 1 teacher and ask ourselves, what would so-and-so have done in this with this equation? So here's what I would do. Here's what Mr. Q would do. So we're going to get this whole equation to equal 0. So we're going to take this 180 and subtract it from both sides. So take that and subtract it from the only other number that doesn't have a variable in it, which is that 236. And so these cancel out. And this right here, this 236 minus 180. Let's do that. So 236 minus 180 is 56. So this is 56. We'll bring that down, that negative 15x. We'll bring down this x squared. Remember, this is positive 56. And we'll bring down that 0. Okay, so two things that we did. We made this whole thing equal 0, and we made some of the numbers smaller, which is nice to have smaller numbers when we're doing some math. Next thing is I'm going to rearrange this x squared. I'm still bring that down. I'm going to bring this negative 15x on this side. I'm going to add that, 56 is equal to 0. So I just switched these two terms right there. So now we have a quadratic, if you remember that from last year. A quadratic equation, or a quadratic is just an equation with a square in it. Okay, so there's a few ways, few options to solve this. Our real goal is to figure out what x is so that if we plugged it in, all of this would equal 0. So a few options, we would use the quadratic formula. If you remember it, negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4a over minus 4ac over 2a. I barely remember it. So let's not use that one. Next one is completing the square, and we could use that. We could factor by grouping, or we can just factor a quick factor with an x in it. So I like you doing the quickest way possible. So I'm going to factor it with an x, so or an x factor. So I'm going to draw an x, and our goal is to figure out two numbers that multiply to the c term. The c term. So this is a term, b term, c term. Here's our c term. So I'm going to write a multiplication symbol, and we want two numbers that multiply to 56 and add up to the b term, so which is negative 15. So we're going to use our calculator. And let's just focus on this 56. What are two numbers that multiply to 56? I think my times tables are pretty good at this point in life. So I think it's 7 times 8. So 7 times 8 is 56. So I'm going to write a 7 and an 8. So these two numbers multiply to 56. But do these two numbers add up to negative 15? No, they add up to positive 15. So but I think we could figure this out. If I made this to a negative 7, well, now these two don't multiply to positive 56, and these two definitely don't add up. This would add up to 1. So let's do this. Let's make this also a negative. So negative 7 times negative 8 multiplies to positive 56, and negative 7 minus 8 adds up to negative 15. So we have our two numbers. And so because we have that, we can just draw two sets of parentheses, okay? And we can write x minus 7 from this number right here, and x minus 8. You could write them in any order. You could write x minus 8 here and x minus 7. Just make sure you have both numbers there. So we factor this. We know that this is correct because if we distributed or FOILed, we would get this equation back. So we'll take this, and we're going to use a zero product property. So we're going to write, so we're going to set x minus 8 equals 0. So, and we're also going to set x minus 7 equal to 0. And then we'll just solve these two equations right here. So I'm going to, the opposite of subtraction is adding. So x plus 7, or add 7 on both sides. So x equals 7. And on this one, we'll add 8 to both sides. So x equals 8. And so we have our answer. Actually, answers. We have two answers. We have two answers because look, there's a square there. So most likely we'll have two answers when we work it all out. So it's x equals 7 or x equals 8 is our final. Make sure that looks like an R. Yeah. So x equals 7 and x equals 8 are our final answers. So yeah, that's how you figure out what x is when you have an inscribed angle and some angles that are formed when you have a tangent line and a secant line and you have a square right there. So hopefully this helps. Yeah, if you need to review your factoring, go review it, look at your notes from last year, but hopefully this was enough to help you get the correct answer. So yeah, have a great day.